Okay, so it's pretty clear that if you've been here for the sessions, that these guys have made life really clear, except they haven't, right? Because they've been, in my mind, contradicting themselves constantly. It's like, you need to get across all this tech, and it's really easy, but it's really hard. You need to use all these tools, but I'm just going to give you 48 of them. But you don't have time to do that, but you have to do it now. But you can't wait till later. But if you don't do it now, you're screwed. But wait, you're great. And we love you, and it's all about you, and don't worry, because it's super easy. And so my first question is to you, my friend. You're teaching this stuff. How do you keep up with this stuff? Because you're meant to be like the filter that your students have to say, hey, this is a good thing, try this tool. And yet you were already saying, I can't even keep up with the tools.
Yeah, that's a great question. I keep up with it by only following about 4 people. So I had to limit the number of people I follow. And then every week I try and test 1 or 2 things. I give myself some rules around how long I can spend on it. But yeah, it is. I do think actually this is probably like later the DSM-7 will have a term for like a disorder that was caused by trying to follow all of the new AI tools that have come out, and I will have it. But yeah, no, I'm conscious of like it's getting a little maddening. It's also why I do talk about like kind of once you get to a certain spot, pick your tools and stick with them, because the other part is that they. Every week someone drops something new, and then a company that used to be sort of 3rd tier, whatever, video generation, suddenly becomes 1st tier facial emotion, technique. So yeah, it's challenging, I guess, is the less long answer.
Sure. So Bill, you are obviously tracking this stuff pretty fast, right? And yet there is a sense that you should actually sit with tools to appreciate them, right? And one of the problems we have is and we get into this in the first part of our panel, we're going to get to some technical stuff later, but I just want to start at the hype level. That if you read the hype about anything that comes out, it is the coolest, best, greatest, whatever. And that was probably even written by ChatGPT in the first place, right? So keeping up with it, it's one thing to know that's come out and that's come out and that's come out, but you actually have to sit with tools to get some appreciation of them. I mean, your example of, artists with paintbrushes, they used the paintbrushes a lot before they were good with them. How do you assess quality versus just quantity here?
Yeah, I mean, I think actually the change when you zoom out happens actually slower than people think. I agree. Every time a PR cycle happens, everyone's like, oh yeah, Pika now has you can drive facial expressions, and then Runway will follow with that, and look at what this enables. But if I like the 3 areas I care the most about is like the perception stuff and the generative stuff, and then maybe just CGI. In perception, I mean, it's still frickin' reality capture and photogrammetry, right? Like the way you capture this stuff hasn't really changed. And okay, we had nerfs, it took a little bit longer. Now we have splats, they're way faster and more editable, but you're still kind of like, it's more of an evolution than it is like a crazy revolution. And I think for the things that do seem like an insane leap and change, like Sora, we just get bored of it quickly and we adapt faster. So in my opinion, I think when you zoom out, it's not that crazy. And I do think you should pick your tools. But at the same time, I mean, I will say like your changing cost is very low. If you have a bunch of prompts you've been enjoying, it's very easy for you to
hang on. The problem that these people have isn't the money. The problem these people have is their time.
Yeah.
Like there are only so many more hours before I die. And you said it, I overheard you at breakfast, right? I'm not going to learn another goddamn application.
Yeah, that was a true story. Until it wasn't, that was a true story.
Yes, exactly. So
I think pick one tool in every modality, make something with it, and then move on when you start hitting the constraints of those tools.
Can I fight with you? This will be like our first lovers quarrel.
Let's do it.
I say don't move on. Because I really believe part of our problem is that there's never going to be a stop. Right? So if we keep moving on, and I have to talk to the students about this all the time. If we keep moving on and we keep testing new things, we will never become good at the thing we were really there to do, whether it be tell story or make certain kinds of video or whatever you want to do. Because for me, I think about this all the time. I love painting. I love going to museums. I love looking at paintings. For my like a birthday, my partner got me this, go to a paint lab and paint your thing. And that thing, I mean, I love painting. I've been researching painting, studying painters. Like, I love painting. And then I just painted such trash. And I think at one point, she put it up in the bathroom and then she just put it in the garage. But like, we have to get through the trash phase. 100%. And so that's my thing about moving on is I worry about too much moving on.
Well, I think we're probably agreeing because when you move on, the stuff you take with you translates so beautifully to the new tools, right? But if you
Okay.
don't want to change, like, I think, yes, sit with a tool for a while. Like, in my opinion, all the image generators, Stable Diffusion, Midjourney, whatever you're using, are kind of all largely the same. And I think the same thing with video, with the exception of Sora, which, as you eloquently pointed out, isn't widely
Now
available. They all are kind of the same.
let's just rewind there for a second. You said fuck Sora, and I say fuck you because
really?
I think Sora is really good.
Love this.
So Andy, my question to you is: there are two perceptions here on Sora, right? One, that it's an incredible breakthrough in technology, and it is evolving really quickly. And it's already doing things that were exceptionally unexpected from just weeks ago. And even since like it's been out, and by the way, people are using it, and there are lots of people that are in the early alpha stage of doing stuff with it, and they are adding new stuff to it all the time. So that's my perception of the world, right? And then your perception of the world is they won't give it to me. I'm going to cry at an FMX conference about it.
Very accurate. Very accurate.
But the hype about it has a real play here, right? Because it's not just whether this artist or this tech guy likes it or not. It's what the client thinks we can do with it. Can you talk to that point?
Yeah, I was going to say I want to turn this into a three-way fight.
Well, we're going to get four-way in a second,
I hope it's a
right?
four-way.
Yeah.
So the thing that I've always kind of said, hype. So there's three levels of using AI, right? There's the influencer level, which is all hype. It is like, this just dropped 6 hours ago. I just made this video. It's a treadmill. It's literally, if you don't keep feeding it every day, all day.
Photoshop is dead.
Yeah, like so you can live in that level, and there are many that do, and I would say actually most are currently. And then there's the 6 to 8 month timeline, which is figure out how, basically build a tech stack around a project, around a deliverable, around an execution, but an ephemeral pipeline, one that you know is going to fall apart as you're delivering, but you at least are not going to switch from Midjourney to Stable Diffusion midstream. And then there's the professionals, which are going to be on the 18-month, 2-year, 3-year timelines, where they're going to really lock in, really build pipelines, and basically like, yeah, I mean, it sucks. Sora came out and we're already committed to Stable Diff, but we're going to deliver our movie with Stable Diff because we're mid-production and we're going to go. And I think it's on the individual to decide what of those 3 tiers they want to live in.
Yeah, but there's also the client that walks into the room that says, we thought we'd set our budget up for next year of 20,000, and you say, but I thought your budget this year was 200,000. And they say, well, yeah, but with AI, right, it's not going to cost as much.
I think that's the clients getting confused of what tier they're talking to, because there are a lot of folks reaching out to like an Instagram. I just worked with a guy who's a computer scientist that got some notoriety in a good way, making some really cool AI animations. Just quit his job because he's gotten 2 quick gigs, doing visuals for concerts. And my reaction was like, dude, do not quit your job and move to LA because you got these 2 jobs. Because it's FlashPan. They wanted him to do exactly what he did on his Instagram. He doesn't have that sort of deep bench of client service and understanding, and they think they're used to working with really the tier 3. Tier 2 is kind of new, and they're going to tier 1. They're going to the influencers expecting tier 3 professionalism at tier 1 costs, and that's a big problem.
But some of it is the hype machine, right? Which I think is, to your point, is like everyone's out there telling everyone AI is free. And like I mentioned before, is like until you've actually worked in it and failed to get the results you want, you think it's effortless. So clients think it's both free and effortless. So it makes sense that they keep coming, we're just seeing across the board, lower and lower budgets on the commercial side, on the television side, film side. I mean, the hype cycle is not helping it for sure.
So let's talk about the pro level. Elena, you were talking in your talk, and I thought it was a really good point about how critical data is. Now, I'm a professional, and I want to do high-end stuff. I'm going to do the bottom tier that we were just hearing about a second ago. But are most of these data libraries that are being used for training in just RGB? Like, where's the high dynamic range footage for the training data? If I'm sort of meant to be delivering as a professional now, I'm going to want to have high dynamic range. I'm going to want to have stuff that isn't having artifacts of compression, which most of the broad data out there has.
Yeah, so the thing is now, maybe you can work with the limitations that you have right now with LDR, And then there will be another AI that maybe creates you an HDR and so on. So there are ways that you can come up with these limitations, or maybe you can just directly build your data set and start from that, I suppose.
Okay, but let's say I'm sitting in the audience here and I'm going to hit up one of the guys on the stage that's clearly got something to do with a venture capitalist, and I'm thinking, oh, I've got this really cool idea, right? And then you go, well, yeah, that'd be really good. I'm going to take that back to A16Z. And there's like, well, this is really, really great. The thing is, it's not really hitting a broad enough market. And I'm like, yeah, but I want to do it for broadcasting kind of film stuff. That's a very narrow slice. And they go, well, yeah, but if you could do it for the general population, like there are millions of users, you're 3,000 users, I don't know it's worth training on the kind of data you need for professional film. Are we not risking that we're going to get marginalized because it's just not cost effective to make super high-end tools that we need with these higher quality things, because just getting that much training data and that much time to make those models is going to hurt us?
So what's your...
So I mean, like, is it going to be cost effective to produce the premier tools that we want to produce the IMAX quality HDR, high-res, 8K stuff? Because, quite frankly, having a business plan that supports such a niche is unlikely to be profitable.
Well, in the end, it's about you really first need to figure out if it is profitable. So once you have decided that, then you will make every effort to make that happen. So in the end, it's not like you do first something and then you figure out if it is profitable. So you need to start first thinking about, okay, I want to do this to this end to gain this amount of money or to get this stuff. So it's like, I think in the end it's about make the right decisions, not like the other way around, I suppose, right?
Could I ask a question? I'm going to take this opportunity to ask something that I've been theorizing, which is I feel like a smaller data set that is very well segmented and classified, especially for image generation and video generation, is far superior to a higher volume. So as an industry, should we be putting our focus not on building data sets, but making good data sets?
Yeah,
like, where should we be focusing?
Fully agree with that. And that was one of the points that I tried to convey. It's not about having a billion images. It's about the data that you have, make it correct and collect it in a proper way and curate it. I mean, there is a bunch of, in these billion images that Meta used for the SAM, probably there is a lot of curation of that data, a lot of processing. And also there is now, in the research area, ways to use physics to augment your data. So you might have a small data set, but if you know how the world works, if you know the physical loads, for example, for simulation, there are ways that, for example, you just using your loss function when you train your model, you put a physical physical formula there, and then you automatically train your system. Instead of data from the world, you can train your system with the physics that you know govern the world. So this is, to me, the next big step in AI training, that you will be able to insert the physical laws directly in the models.
And does that work as sort of an override on the other data that's in the data set? Like, how does that work in a practical sense?
There are many ways that you can make that happen. You can start with a pre-trained model, for example, or maybe you can start from scratch and directly insert your physical formulas in your laws and then train your whole AI with the physics directly.
Cool.
We also have some other, I'm going to call them ethical issues that don't come up a lot. I mean, one of them is the environmental impact, right? So the current estimates are, and they're only estimates, they're not actual facts, is that like 5 minutes of Sora is about an hour of an H100. So
Sora. Okay, that's right.
I feel like they're never going to give you access.
Hey, if you're out there.
But if I'm using Sora to generate a lot of material, and in the case of Airhead, the short film, they estimated they had a 300 to 1 shooting ratio, right? So that's 300 times the length of the film, which is in turn generating a lot of heat because it's using a lot of power. Like we kind of skip over the kind of, it's in the cloud kind of thing. Well, the cloud is just somebody else's computer, right? It's not like it magically isn't using power. Do you want to talk to that?
Yeah, I mean, I know for a fact one of Microsoft's biggest investments was Helion, which is a nuclear power startup right now. So they're a fission, FISSION, power company. So I think that was we were already trending in a bad direction though, just in general when it comes to power creation. So I think AI will definitely put a point on that, but I do think there are the really big players know, a lot of people talk about how compute is going to be the great limiting factor, but in fact now there are more and more voices starting to say that it will in fact be power that's going to be the limiting factor. So I think this fucking sucks because it's just capitalism, but as that becomes a limiting factor to someone's marketplace, they will begin to come up with solutions for it. And right now, one of the bigger solutions is nuclear power, which is barring it going wrong, like a relatively clean energy.
Can I jump in here? I believe it's interesting, right? But in the grand scheme of things, and these stats are at least recent as of like last month, is like data centers comprise 2% of power utilization and contribution, or 2% of contribution to emissions globally, which is a small number in the grand scheme of things. But I also think like on one hand, people are building the $100 billion data center. At the same time, we are getting more and more compute at the edge, like our devices are capable of doing more. And so I think what you'll start seeing is, yes, you'll train these massive models, these large pre-trained models, but you're sort of amortizing the cost over billions of users. And then at the end of the day, you're going to run those models at the edge on a GPU locally, rather than the current situation we're in, where like if I'm remembering the stat correctly, it was like every image that you generate is basically takes the same power as you charging your iPhone, which kind of feels a little crazy right now.
It feels insane. But I wonder though, is the other part of that is going to be as we move away from just large language models to reasoning models. I also think, kind of to Elena's point during her session of like making decisions about how to handle certain things, is that not everything is going to be a Sora problem, right? Like Sora is going to make decisions to not run the 300 to 1, as much as Las Vegas power consumption model. It'll say like, hey, this is just a close-up of a face. I'm just going to run this other model. So I think as reasoning becomes a bigger conversation in AI, we'll also see reduced power output.
Yeah. Ben, I also have this issue with people talking about AI just as an amorphous mass. It's like everyone should own a computer because they're really clever. And it's like, but I own gazillions of computers, right? I like there are 23 in my car just to do, whatever. And that's before you get to the entertainment system. So like the model, like you ran through all this stuff and I thought it was like really, huge, and Bill as well. But the thing about it is like they're going to be spread throughout my train. And if I want to actually achieve something, it's very unlikely as a professional in this room that you're just going to go to a Sora model, which again, I think is really good, but it's not the thing that we're going to go to, because that would be the good enough thing in the example of, a bit like going to a stock footage library, right? I want a picture of a couple on a beach. If there's a stock footage and that's good enough, I'll use it. But I have no control of which actors were in that shot because it's stock footage. And if I'm working with a director, I'm working professionally, I'm going to want to have the control, the explicit control of having my people, in which case I'm now just talking about tools. Mm-hmm. Yeah?
Yeah.
So I guess the thing is, aren't we in this sort of problem state that people are worried about, quote, AI, which is kind of like an absurd way to even discuss it, because which one are we talking about? We're going to be having about 100 of them.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, and I think too we will have software as AI dedicated to deciding what other AI get used in the process.
Well, that gets us to no. That's a really good point though. Like, do we not think that the role for a professional is more likely to be the assistant that accelerates an option rather than the solution? Because don't you think, like, you've surveyed the tools, right? Like, don't you think like that's what we kind of really want? We just want to have the better accelerator here and here rather than a solution?
I do think the best work will be humans orchestrating a federation of these models, right?
Yeah.
And you choose the best models for the job, just like you choose your software packages and like whatever, like, development environment, whatever you choose, it's very task specific. I think the one size fits all thing it's totally valid too. And to your point, it's funny. I think a lot of the fear of AI comes from this too, because it is all clumped together. It reminds me of the metaverse, right? Like what is the metaverse? Well, like, Matthew Ball has this like 17-page definition of it. And I think it's like basically become like AI. It's gone the other way where AI has basically become equivalent to generative AI. And people are forgetting about all the perception stuff that's been happening too. But Yeah, I mean, like, I think right now humans will be orchestrating these models in classical workflows to get that level of control you're asking for. But yeah, I think it's also all the rise of like agentic AI systems, to Ben's point, is interesting. And like, I want to be able to, basically say, here's how I'm using Comfy UI with Runway, with like Luma, and then an Unreal Engine. Now just automate this for me. And it sort of constructs that pipeline for you. I think we'll start seeing like kind of duct tape orchestrator AIs too.
I think too, it's going to raise the sort of a philosophical question of do we all want control? So I think right now it's easy to just act like we all want it all the time, like, oh, it's going to take my job, but I really want to do that. And I think we're going to realize a lot of us actually, I would love to, just have food show up on the table and not have to think about too much. Like, I mean it. Like, I think as we get into agent systems, you'll be surprised. Not everyone's going to want to be in total control. They're going to, like you said, they're going to want to sort of be in there.
I think there's a crowd of that it's good enough and that'll do. But Andy, I wanted to ask you a question, right? From a filmmaking point of view, we have a whole language of stuff, yeah? Now, if you look at the examples that we saw in your talk, actually, with using a still camera reference because you know the training material. The trouble is that's metadata. We know the lens, we know the stuff because it all got included in the file. But there's nothing in the metadata about what a tracking shot is versus a panning shot versus a push in versus a pullback. Like there's a lot of visual language that we use and none of that's in any metadata. So it's very hard, isn't it? So how do I because it's already well in stills, but now we're getting into video and I want to be able to describe my shots, but there's unless we're going to start employing teams and teams of people to do, which is my earlier point about our industry, specific industry terms, then are we going to have to learn some other way of describing it, like move to the left at 10?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to me, that's the most exciting thing about AI is that it's replacing all existing interfaces, but it's not existing the sort of the human thought and the human expression. It's changing the words, it's changing the buttons, it's changing the way that we interface with the computer, but it's not taking away the manner in which we see the world and the way that we describe it to each other. So yeah, we're going to start prompting weird things because somebody discovers some weird way that the data set was tagged. I had a hell of a time trying to get a 3/4 down shot, like a hell of a bad time. And it was before control nets were really sort of usable. And it was looking down as viewed from above. And I was trying everything. And I eventually got it through some, permutation, some jumbled way of describing to Stable Diffusion that it's a 3/4 down shot of a city. But it's the interfaces are changing, and we're going to we went to film school. I was the last of everything. I was the last to shoot Super 8, last to shoot black and white 16, last to edit sound on a sound bed, last to edit picture on a flatbed, first to shoot digital, first literally every semester. Then I got into visual effects, which I didn't do any visual effects in film school for 4 years. I never learned it. I'd sort of learned After Effects on my own time. I don't regret all of those dead things that I learned because the digital was built on those from a terminology standpoint. Like there are no sprockets anymore, but I know what key code is. And somebody else has programmed that knowledge into these models.
Oh, hang on, that's the bit that I'm going to bump on. Have they programmed that into these models, or are we expecting them to have somehow magically got that stuff in there?
I don't think they've
programmed them.
They haven't programmed them intentionally. They haven't programmed them way. Visual effects software initially intentionally built on film, on physical media. But now you see a lot of things. You see a lot of terminology in VFX software that's misapplied, or it's like, it's not exactly what that means anymore. I can't think of an example right now, but I know I've bumped into it all the time of that's not actually what that means, but it's okay.
But don't you think there's going to be a little bit more, like one of the rad questions that had come up earlier was just around sort of the convergence with video games? I think a lot of what you're talking about is as we move away from just static shots that everyone knows and we get into a movement language, I think we might be using interfaces that feel like a combination of human language and whatever, dragging out the dolly track in sort of an Unreal Engine-esque layer to get shots. And then I think we're going to get to spots where we're like, but surprise me. And it'll do things that we can't do right now because we're still limited by weight of camera, distance of move, those kind of things.
Sure. But I can imagine a scenario where you're talking to me, and I'm like, hearing one of your pitches, and you're just describing a shot, and you say, hey, like it's going to be like Clueless crossed with 12 Angry Men, but done in a Pixar style, right?
Oh, I like that.
And,
I'm in.
and
I'm
everyone
in.
goes,
Sold.
okay, so I got that, right? Like it's
Sold.
a cartoon and it's comedy, but it's The Jury. We haven't seen that, right? That sounds like a good idea. Let's do that, right? The trouble is, I try entering that into Sora or something like it, and it's going to blow up on every one of those IP references.
You want that. This is the beauty. It's,
well, hang on, you want it to blow up, or you want it to...
you want it to blow up.
You want it to stop. You want it to do nothing.
Because we hate Sora.
If the AI gets you, if the AI
No, the AI doesn't get you. The AI literally says...
But that's what I'm saying.
It won't work with that language. You can't say a Hitchcockian shot because it goes, no, that's copyright infringement. You can't say...
The model is capable of that.
Yeah.
Well, the model is capable of that, but obviously the companies, for liability reasons, aren't doing it. But I think the meta point here, and also Elena's point about synthetic training data and other ways to augment data sets would be interesting. Like whether it's like feeding Sora like synthetic training data on every different type of shot and vignette to understand film language, or it's the hybrid approach of like, oh, you kind of have a 3D engine, which you have a physically accurate camera and you like do your shots. I think there'll be a couple different ways to get to that same result where we can start like using the language we know.
My point is they were happy originally to take my references of films, which by the way is how we all kind of communicate in film, right? With cultural touch points. But now, because of this ethical backlash of saying, oh my God, I can't believe that you're stealing by using training data of existing work and existing artists, the companies are saying, oh my God, we better put up barriers. And so the reaction to the valid concern about copyright is that you can no longer use film techniques and film references as touch points.
But like every filmmaker, when you look at like the Zale shot, the trombone shot that that Scorsese used so well, and then he has to he never did it, but like
okay, but if you're talking to an AI 6 months from now, my beer bet with you is you get bumped on the second that you use the word Scorsese.
We're done. I love this beer bets.
I think
FMX. You saw it.
Mike on this one.
No, we bet beers. No, but here's the thing: is like if you go to a site, I don't know if anyone uses iCandy. Do y'all use iCandy at all? Oh, sweet. It's mind-blowing, right? And you realize, like, if you grew up with the classics and you think of, like, trombone as belonging to Scorsese or Coppola or whoever, like, you realize there are actually, like, 900 new types of shots that have come out since 1994. It's just we don't talk about them very much because they happen in music videos rather than blah, blah, blah. We're going to see that kind of stuff happen just in AI. But there's no one filmmaker who can't point, George Lucas, you can point back to old samurai film, and friggin' even Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah, no, we know that, but we're forcing the tech companies through our hostility over copyright concerns to actually take that off the table.
But see, that's
fuck the tech companies.
But that's the strongest single argument for community, open source, crowdsourced data sets and trained models. Like the problem right now is that these models cost a ton of money because you have to gather billions of data points, you have to curate them, you have to clean them up. So the onus is really on the community to get behind these efforts. There are efforts for open source data sets. There are efforts behind open source training of models, federated learning, all kinds of stuff. And if we just kind of idly wait for OpenAI to give us Sora, and maybe this time they'll take the safety catches off a little bit. We're going to continually be disappointed and continually waiting for that moment.
Okay, I'm going to get Bill to weigh in on this because I don't think you are allowing for the fact that the big tech companies have a massive profitability window on general use for the what I call good enough crowd. And so that is so lucrative. Now you just weigh in on this, right? That the desire to keep us happy so we can use the term, like Hitchcockian kind of zoom or something like that. They're like, yeah, what do we care, right? That's not important. They'll work out some other way of doing their shots because we're going to service the broader community.
I mean, I think it is the incentives aren't there, right? Like you're right that the most lucrative market, which by the way, and this isn't just like big tech, I think it's researchers in general, keep focusing on text to content because it's the thing that has the largest TAM. Anyone can write a freaking prompt, but a lot of the creators in this room probably don't feel comfortable expressing themselves necessarily as a bunch of tokens, even if you learn a bunch of the stylistic stuff that you outlined, right? And so I think, yeah, the good enough stuff is going to do fine. I mean, like, look at Photoshop, right? Like Firefly, like I love Adobe, but it kind of sucks compared to every other model, but it's in Photoshop. People are using it for commercial purposes. It's awesome. And then on the consumer side, yeah, like you can go into DALL-E, and if you wanted to make that like, I don't know, for your like frickin', you know, weekend club or whatever, or your like class project, you wanted to make some posters, it's good enough to do that. And it can do text now. Yeah. So I think like it's funny, more builders, whether it's like big tech adapting their technologies, like Sora, obviously OpenAI is like exploring and testing the waters with a bunch of studios right now. Other larger companies that are creating these large models will be hesitant to get into this space, and so will like entrepreneurs, quite frankly, as long as there's this like public, you know, kind of this like dark cloud that looms over this stuff, to the point where people aren't even like are asking themselves to be removed from the Q&A at the FMX conference for asking an AI question, right? So I think
did that really happen?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh, wow.
And so until we address that as like, I don't know, like as a community, to your point, and are comfortable with this new set of tools, yeah, the incentive is going to go for the largest TAM, and yeah, I'm sorry, you're going to lose out on your dolly zoom, and you can't put in, you know, Hitchcock in there.
I completely so our second lover's quarrel. Not only do I disagree, I actually think it's an opportunity. We all have an opportunity right now while you're watching all of these big studios wait and pause on how to use the tools. Because by the way, every big studio, all your big VFX companies, everyone's got secret AI teams. Like, I'll just out it now. Everyone's got secret AI teams.
They just won't talk about
them. They just won't talk about it. So, like everyone's very like, well, we'll wait and see. And once it's legal, we'll jump in. They're all in. They're knee deep in. So your opportunity right now is, while they're hesitant about how to use this, or like you mentioned, not all AI is generative, but they won't use or expose a lot of non-generative AI tools because they're just afraid of the word coming back to like AI as a catch-all. They're so terrified of it. Now's your opportunity to use it. Now's your opportunity to use the Zali on a mid-journey image.
Well, it's not just using technical terms, right? Because like if you watch Saturday Night Live, which, you know, I love watching,
it's great,
then you know that it deliberately parodies and uses satire, and in doing so, it deliberately tries to copy the style of whatever it's parodying. So it's almost like the way that the industry is heading is that it's going to have no sense of humor. Because to have a sense of humor would allow me to make a... What?
I said going to? Yeah, sorry.
It's not going to allow me to produce the parody of this because that's a copyright infringement, and it can't tell the difference between the legality of when it's okay to satirize and it's okay to, or not okay to copy. So...
Open source is the answer to that, right?
That's why I prefer something that I can run local all day, every day. Like, I prefer Stable Diffusion over Midjourney, over DALL-E, over anything else, not because I think it's better, but because I run it locally, and I'm able to, like, to the power concern, right? Like, I'm not blowing up some H100 somewhere to make, you know, 800 images of something stupid. I'm taking longer because my GPU is not an H100, and I'm paying for the power because it's at my house. But that sort of local control of it, and like, to me, it's the moment that I'm paying monthly for access to a service and building my pipeline on that dependency, I am now in the worst position in the world, which is my product, which is my service, the content that I'm being paid to make and deliver, is sitting on top of somebody who could change the terms of service, change the conditions at a, you know, any moment. Anybody whose company is just... Like, all these companies are like, oh, you know, we're going to help you with your ChatGPT prompts. We're a startup. We're going to raise $10 million making this interface for ChatGPT. The moment OpenAI changes anything, your entire tech stack is going to collapse. So it is, like, I don't actually give a shit if Sora ever gets, like, the exact prompt that I want. They may not. What I do give a shit about is that there are open source models.
I'm going to get a free Sora t-shirt, like as in... You know,
introduce us to the maybe 30 people who have actually used it and get them talking about how many iterations.
Haven't you read my site? No, sorry.
You had a great article on that.
I have a question about synthetic data for Elena, if I can. So there's a lot of stuff about ground truth and getting all this stuff, and then we start talking about synthetic data, and people start like pulling their hair out. I've had discussions where people are really upset because they're thinking that it isn't real, it's fake, it's synthetic data. But every time I've made I think every time I've made anything to do with machine learning, we've had massive multipliers on the raw data. Like we obviously flip it, we rotate it, we do all sorts of things. We create synthetic data. Then I hit the omniverse, I start doing massive amounts of synthetic data because I have the ability to not only create the metadata, but create various tags that go with it as it changes. Why do you think there is such concern about this thing about whether it's real data or whether it's synthetic? Or is that just me in Australia and you guys are all cool with it?
Yeah, I guess the problem with synthetic data is that many times it's not going to be able to reproduce complex effects. For example, now rendering is super advanced, so you can reproduce reality, but to really, for example, render global illumination, it needs some time. So this synthetic data, many times they are doing real-time render, which sometimes is limited to actual effects. So let's say you train a car to go through the streets and you have only trained it with synthetic video games. Well, even though now the technology to render car driving engines is very good, maybe in reality you find water in the streets, or maybe it rains a lot, and then the system has never seen this kind of real scenario. So then then your data will be biased towards something that your system has never seen it. So there is a high risk there so that it won't work on the real world. No?
Okay, so a related point about the bias. So that's the other thing, like that I call the great unwashed get up in arms about, is that like it's all bias. And I'm like, okay, for a start, like bias doesn't equate to bad. Let me give you an example. Like when I've been training on stuff, I'll give you a simplified version. If you're training on an identifier for these pop plants that we've got that are dying at the front of FMX, right? And I wanted to have my phone so I could just put it at the leaf and tell what plant it is, then what I might do is I might get a bunch of realistic photos of these plants, and then I would use synthetic data to multiply it for different things. But I might also deliberately go, you know what, it isn't the color of these things, it's the leaf shape that defines the species. So I'll make a bunch of synthetic data that has the leaves with car paint, right? And of course that doesn't exist in nature, but what it's going to do is it's going to deliberately bias the model so it's identifying the species based on leaf shape, not on leaf color. That's a completely valid thing from an ML person to do. An ML engineer doesn't bat an eyelid, but if you start saying, I'm deliberately introducing bias into my data set, then people run around like their hair's on fire.
But I guess that the kind of bias is good because it's bias that you have control for your system. The problem is that let's see you take Reddit and then you train your model with Reddit feedback. Then your AI, maybe it's a mess, no? And then you will have all the bias of the society, which might not be the best. So I guess if it is intentional bias, then you are good, probably. You want that, but if it is not...
Yeah, because I was going to say, I think one of the unsung heroes are those people that can craft data. Like crafting your training data is like a real skill that is like hidden away. Like I'd feel really bad if I was good at doing that because I feel like I'm doing bad things, bad voodoo. But like Ryan, who did the first facial masking for people of the LGBT community, he deliberately, would shoot people so they could mask their identities in this documentary that he won a SciTech award for Welcome to Chechnya. The thing about it is, like, he had a lot of time crafting the training data, and when he didn't do that, he had it, for example, slightly long story, but he had a bunch of cameras around the actors, and he would roll, but he couldn't sync all the cameras, so he just let them run, and then he was like, just sync them once, and then I'll just whatever. And so it was just generating loads of training data, right? And then you're the director, and here's where the actor's meant to be looking. So you do the take, and then you just talk to the director. You're able to good, and then we'll do another take. Okay, deliver the line, and then just go back to talking. Well, of course, when they got all the training data, it completely was biased to this side of the guy's face, right? And it's a classic case of more data, not better. And so only when he curated that data did he get anywhere. But I feel like this idea that the best thing we can do with machine learning is give it tons of data is just an urban myth. Like, could you comment on that? Like, it's important what it is.
It's important to give enough data, I would say. Tons of data. I mean, maybe we can talk about artificial general intelligence that these guys are trying to build. And for this kind of area, maybe the only way to go is just use tons of data, like the data of the world, and then try to codify in a general intelligence. And then for that, maybe it's just what matters is size. But for particular problems that are constrained, and here I think many of the problems that you guys want to solve are very well constrained to and you can define them. So you can plan how to collect your data in a way that it works for your application. So I think, to me, these are two different things. Like, you collect your data trying to emulate our human brain, and then you collect your data for a particular problem, and then you train your AI so that it solves your problem. So it's, I don't know.
Bill, if I can ask you a completely different question. One of the things I think is really interesting about these perceptions of stuff, building on this kind of idea that I think there are some bad words that have bad connotations that not, is it's really interesting, I think, to think about when we're talking about things being, and you were talking a lot about nerves and stuff, which is basically a representation of whatever we're looking at inside the neural network. And obviously you can polygonalize it and export it, but it's sitting inside, and then you've got these ideas of massive compression because of latent space. But it's kind of also interesting, I think, to think that these are very different representations of data, or rather representations not even of data, but of the thing that it is having the essence of. My example is bananas, right? If it's going to produce a picture of a banana, it has an understanding of banananess, which is yellow and bent and stuff. It doesn't know actual pictures of bananas that are stored in a human accessible kind of database. How do you think, like, is it important that we get across the fact that we're anthropomorphizing that it remembers bananas? We're actually, this concept of latent space and a banananess is a very different way for the computer seeing the world. Do you think that matters for us or not? It's just a black box and we don't care.
I think the abstractions to explore latent space is important and make it far more important, but is important. But to your point about latent space, sort of like, taking 200 to 300 terabytes of images and compressing it down to 5 gigs, and you've got this lower dimensional, like, kind of in quotes compressed version of all the visual information that it's seen is really fascinating. And I think, like, the whole field of AI interpretability is trying to figure out how to do that with, like, text and visual and all these models, right? Just so we understand what the hell they're actually doing. But at the same time, we've got some very cool things we can do right now, right? Like, if you've got a banana, but you want to head in the direction of, I don't know, a freaking, like, Mike Seymour, I don't know, for some reason, and you can kind of head in the vector of that direction, you can start sort of exploring latent space with sort of visual UI, right? Which is interesting. And I think it really becomes important when we start debating this question of, not to take it back to Sora, but when you, like, let's say, take all the frickin' publicly available data, as the OpenAI CTO said, on the internet and create this model, how much of a world model has it learned? And how does that world model compare to something that you might create, like in an omniverse, like an explicitly controllable world model? I think it becomes interesting because those are perhaps the ways we'll get those levers of control that we want. Maybe it'll be elusive and the interpretability folks won't ever figure it out. But right now it feels like this, like, I hate to, kind of use the alien analogy, especially when you talked about, anthropomorphizing these things, is like, but it feels like this alien intelligence mapping out visual intelligence because it just looks so different than how we might construct it.
Paul Debevich said to me, I thought it was a brilliant comment. He said, it's just a really big fluke. It's almost like just pure luck that latent space actually gives us something that we actually find really pretty valid. Like it's like when they discovered that radio could go over the horizon, right? It's like too good to be true that you could actually get all of this data down to not much. Okay, so I'm going to come back to you now on a Sora-esque point.
Here we go.
As a teacher and an educator.
Let's get at it. Okay,
so do you need to teach your students, your filmmaking students, if we've established that maybe we don't need to have we won't have perhaps the computer understanding all of the tracking and circular, but let's say I'm doing a drone shot around something, yeah? And I'm putting it in Sydney Harbour because I come from Sydney and it's great. Okay, so if it's a 30-second drone shot going around a boat on Sydney Harbour, and I put that in, and that's the continuous prompt, as it were, because you can change it over time, right? But it's the continuous prompt for that 30 seconds. Then the program tries to put Sydney Harbour-ness into every frame, which means it keeps on finding the goddamn Opera House and the Harbour Bridge, and it doesn't come to the other side because spatially it's not saying we've established Sydney, so I no longer to see it as I go back over here. It says, hey, I'm Sydney Harbour. Oh, I'm Sydney Harbour again. I'm still Sydney Harbour, right?
It's just Opera House after Opera House.
Opera House, right? So
like
my point is this. To be a good filmmaker, do they now have to learn latent space language, or is it a blip and you're just going to say, dudes, just do whatever you think is artistically great because they'll sort that out with the tech in a year?
Yeah, it's a killer question. And also, too, I think, full disclosure, like, I don't think I'm smart enough to really understand the impact of sort of latent space on the generative side. What I would say, though, is, we do talk a lot about negative prompting. Right, and because I liken that to a lot of your process as a filmmaker is what you choose not to show, right? So it's like that's just a big part of if we were shooting with an Arri Alexa, I would still be making choices about what not to show. I would still be removing things from set. I would still be crafting my light in a certain way to get a certain emotion, but not others. So on the Sydney Harbour example, one of the things I think is really important is being able to say no Opera House. And that is a big part of prompting, is the negative part of it. But I hear you on the latent space. My hope is that a lot of that stuff right now is being handled outside of the artist's hands.
Okay, but so you and I are working together.
Sure.
And we're
as long as it's not on Sora, we're happy.
We're working together. Fuck you. And we're working together, and Andy, right, is the person that I want to be on because his reaction to me saying that was the shot. Because you as a filmmaker know that the interesting thing for the actor is not the bit where they have the dialogue, but the line that is between the lines where you're getting the reaction and you're understanding the subtext of the scene. So now how the heck do I convey subtext when almost by definition, it's the bit between the lines? I say, he says this, he says this, he says this, but as a filmmaker, you're not filming the person that says that, you're filming the reaction shot. But I mean, how the heck is the computer meant to know, don't look at the thing I'm telling you about?
Yeah. Well, and that, oh my God, it's such a great question. The longer answer is also, I do think it's part of, I think one of the audience members had brought up, where is games coming into film? And part of it will be if Andy is AI and Bialawal is AI and Mike is AI and Ben is like, there will be the ability for those reactions to happen, but on the sort of shot by shot. And then I still think it's you as the director choosing to cut to Andy, or I take it back, choosing to watch all 5 of our reactions through the whole conversation, and then saying Andy is the shot to go to. Like I do think there's a lot around sort of setting up those situations, and I do think there's going to be more dynamic character
I think Andy
stuff.
wants in on this.
I was going to say the tag. I do think also what we're dealing with a little bit. Your question is pointing at sort of the same mentality that existed in the early 2000s, where everyone wanted mini DV, digital video, to look like film. And it's sometime around 2009 and 10 when the Red One was kind of coming in and the video cameras were getting better. People started trying to make video look as good as video could possibly look. I don't give a shit if any AI can use old filmmaking terms because it's not a movie camera.
But this isn't a term. This is
no. I'm saying
Yeah.
it's going to, AI is going to do, I'm not saying it's going to do whatever the hell it wants. It's going to do what it's going to do. And sometimes that will overlap with 3D programs and cameras and human motion. And sometimes it's going to be something kind of new. And I think that it's not going to, the reason Sora is never going to be a button where you just sit down and talk to it for 5 minutes and it makes a movie, is that it will never be capable of that because it's not a camera and it's not a piece of 3D software. What it will do is make something kind of new, like What Dreams May Come, right? Like that was stunning at the time. It's still a huge accomplishment. AI is going to be able to do stuff like that really, really well, things we've never seen before.
Okay, so we're discussing now how I approach a project, which is something that you had explicitly in your talk. And there was a slide that you had up where you were like, there was like tasks, and you said project management-wise, it's going to change. And I was studying that, desperate to understand what you meant. So can I come back to it? Like, how are you saying that we should manage our projects with generative AI differently or ML differently? Because it seemed really insightful and I was too stupid to understand.
So the thing is, typical software development works in a linear way. You start doing A, then you do B, then you do C. But for training an AI, sometimes you have to explore different branches in parallel, different ideas in parallel, because there are many possible solutions there. So a lot of research recent. So then you might want to explore that in parallel to get the best accuracy. So that was I was implying. Like the development of the projects is not linear anymore for a certain part of the pipeline.
And also, there's no one solution, right? So like if you were making a film where like Andy's reaction is the kind of thing that's really going to matter, then you would sort of use different tools to create it. You would use actors to, like AI shouldn't catch all of that. It shouldn't all be handled by AI. Like I think that's on you and I as filmmakers to say, hey, this is the type of film we're going to make. So these do need to be, we need 4 real people in the seats because I may want to go to someone else's reaction.
So Andy, to you, like we have a really good model of the independent filmmaker that's going to go out there and make the short film, and I totally applaud your students. I think it's like
they're the best.
Yeah, absolutely, right. But I want to move away from that model to we're now talking about sets that we've been on where there's 300 people contributing, right? Who should own sort of this? Because I feel at some level there's going to be a need to say like, is it going to be like, well, any department's just doing anything kind of thing, or is it going to be like it's going to settle down to this is something that is really going to have to be spearheaded by visual effects people because it inherently has a bunch of tech in it and they're the techie guys on set? Or do you feel like it's like there's probably going to be like a Genius Bar where there is on LED volumes, a new job which is, hey, these are our ML people? I mean, in other words, running the clock forward, where's it going to land?
I don't think that there's ever going to be like a very simple answer to that because the question is what AI models are we using and what capacity at what phase of production? I don't think that a movie set, a live action movie set, is going to be in a situation where every single person on that set has had their past life replaced with a new life where they're using AI. I don't think that a DP is going to have an AI light meter and an AI camera. And I think that there will be augmentations and changes and shifts in the way everything happens. I love the idea, like if you look at the way the way they write animation, some studios do actually write scripts. A lot of studios have a screenwriter work with a storyboard artist, and there's actually there's a transcript, but there's not a script. Because what you do is you go straight from the idea of the writer and the discussion of the director to storyboards that go straight to animatics, and they've developed in a really, I would say inefficient in that it takes a very long time, but powerful way of developing stories. That's the kind of thing that I think you're going to start seeing in the traditional model.
But it's probable that some people in this room are thinking, they're earlier in their career, they're younger than me, and they're thinking, which kind of area will I go in? So I'm hearing from that maybe like a previous company is going to be an early adopter and a lead head sort of house, lighthouse account for that kind of work. I would have also thought VFX. Does anyone else want to weigh in?
Well, unless they get beat by the the physical production designer who learned these tools.
Or virtual art department.
Yeah, exactly, and beat them to market. Right, or virtual art department. I hope we're all ready for it, but I do think there's a lot of there's some full contact karate coming. Where we're not going to have jobs just magically be really well defined. I do think there's a change coming, and whoever gets there first will win the day.
I agree with that in principle, but in reality, I feel like what works about a film crew is that everybody comes together. Let's say none of us knew each other, right? We all come together. I know my job. I'm going to do my job. You're going to do your job. Yep. You're the DOP, so I know exactly what you're going to do, right? And some of the time we're sitting around doing nothing because we all know we have our jobs to do, and so that's how we do it. Because we don't know each other, we're not an already functioning team. Right.
But what happens when the budget gets cut in half?
I don't know.
So say you had
for the
5,000.
small indie where it's three guys working
I don't think
together.
it's small indie. I think, and again, like this is a longer discussion, but I think it's coming for all of us. I think we're all watching budgets come down, and I don't think it's just 2024.
Are we watching budgets come down? I mean, like TV episodes are really expensive, 20 million an ep.
Yeah, 3 body,
Yeah.
250 mil overall,
Well, that's-
25 mil.
But
an
I
app.
think
But that was all bought pre-2022. I'm betting if we go look at stats right now, you will see. I know there's 430 shows being made in 2024 instead of 1,000 the year before. So call that whatever you will, but let's just say there's less money in the pool. Teams will be smaller.
I don't think it's just.
There's no way to get around it.
But
Everyone says that, but like if you look at the original Blade Runner, it had 300 people on it, and then the sequel had 3,000, right? Every time everyone predicts there are going to be less jobs, there are actually more.
I would agree with you. I just want to say, like, again, like, you know, like if everyone gets that button that you were talking about, right, it doesn't matter. It's not novel. So when indies like can start doing a bunch of cool stuff, awesome. Studios are going to set a huge standard. And I think you will still have well-established roles and responsibilities. These roles may evolve over time. There may be a short period of chaos or whatever, but I don't think like that's going to change tremendously in my opinion, because again, with all that...
Beers.
There we go. Let's
There
do
it
it.
is. Let's do it.
But with all that extra time, I think we're just going to be even more like visual, like umami, to our earlier discussion, that's going to be squeezed in on stage. And so I think like on the screen, on the canvas, whatever it is, interactive, passive, long form, short form, that I think like teams of people making awesome things are going to continue to be a
But
thing.
the teams will get smaller. That's all I'm saying. It's
Maybe
like,
maybe
they'll call it-
outsourcing gets replaced by a bunch of AI. I think like that's an interesting conversation to have. Like right now, a lot of drudgery in animation, especially, kind of gets like brushed under the rug. Like, oh yeah, like keyframes are drawn, and you know.
But that drudgery exists on sets too, and I'm just
totally,
saying, like, it'll get phrased to you as, "We'd love for you to do this film more like the creator," and they'll talk about it like it's sexy, but really what they're saying is 80 million instead of 250 million.
Yo, that budget, ILM got a good chunk of that budget to make that happen.
Yeah.
But I'm going to disagree with both of you. So I think we're at the very toe right now of an insane, chaotic reset that's going to take more than a decade.
Oh, that's agreement. Yeah.
And I don't think that it's about cost savings. Like, I do think that is there. That's a factor, and that's driving commercials into the ground and film and TV into the ground. But that's not what's happening. It's not because, hey, AI is here and it can save money and we just need to implement those cost savings. It's AI is going to replace DPs. It is going to replace this. It's going to replace that, but not in the ways that we necessarily anticipate. It's going to be this movie that we're doing. It's sort of like when motion capture started. It fundamentally changed the way Zemeckis made movies. You know, when Spielberg made Tintin, he was just glowing. It was like the best filmmaking experience he's ever had. That doesn't mean he did then mocap movies only from there forward, but it does mean that we're looking at that kind of a fundamental reset of like nobody is doing the thing that they were trained 20 years to do anymore. And that's not something that happens overnight. And it's not something that happens totally willingly.
So
I think it's a foot race. Well, and by the way, I did not mean to make it sound like AI is bringing the budgets down. I believe budgets are coming down totally absent of AI, just for clarity. Like, I don't think AI has any, I think this is a 2024 thing, and perhaps it does all bounce back. My now wager with Bialawal is that it will not bounce back in the way that it did in 2022, in 2021. I think we're seeing it come down. So I think smaller crews will not only occur in VFX, they will occur on set. And by the way, for super clarity, I don't think AI has anything to do with that. I think viewership is down. I think going to movies is down.
Yeah, you're forgetting one thing. You are now having to create content for the metaverse. So
exactly.
more people, no?
Yeah.
The pie will
More
expand.
media, so in the end, it's going to create more needs.
Yep.
So.
And that will, exactly. And then you'll start to see like fewer people are watching movies because we do have this wild new metaverse land going on. And I'm watching Travis Scott on, a Facebook island. And yeah, completely agreed. Like I just think that will bring.
It's going to be also, we have to make this, call it a film, the way that we're making it now, using this stack of new tech, volumetric capture, mocap, AI, neural rendering, NeRFs, whatever. We have to do it that way because this experience is in a VR headset or on a LED wall in front of a live audience. So it's the tool chain and the roles and responsibilities and the way that the set looks and operates, if there is a set, or post works, is dictated by these really weird new end user experiences. So it's like, I don't think we're going to be making as many films ever again. I don't think we're going to be making as many TV shows. I do think that the same number of people, if not more, will be working in entertainment.
So is that, could we just coin that then? It's more work, it's more work with fewer people per team. Like, right? That's
productivity goes up, but the demand for audiovisual, spatial content is only going to go up, right? And it only has gone up.
Yep.
Yeah.
I love that.
And because our expectations change, and then also the use cases blow up.
And the length of content, by the way. I just want to throw that in there. Length of content.
When are we meant to finish?
Oh, I don't know. Jen.
I think we're supposed to be done now.
I think we're meant to be done now.
All right.
So what I am going to do though is I'm going to finish on a positive note because I like FMX and I like you guys. So what I'm going to do is go down the line from that end to here, if we can, is I think none of us would be on this stage if we didn't feel positively about some aspect of machine learning or AI, right? So maybe if you could individually say what it is, big or small, that gets you out of bed in terms of thinking it's a good thing that you want to be working with or trying or doing, yeah? In a positive sense.
My positive part is that I think the tools that we are using now, they have nothing to do with the tools that we will be using in 1 year. This creates a lot of opportunities for everybody to start exploring new stuff and also to create new kinds of content for new media. So I think as Ben said, it is a huge opportunity for the future.
I have personally never been more creatively rewarded and empowered than I have been in the last year. I've never in my life, my process used to be, I've got a great idea, I need to write the script, I need to come up with a pitch book, and I need to figure out how the hell I can convince somebody or many somebodies to allow me to make that thing. I have gone from idea in my head to finished product more times in the last year than the previous 20 years of my career combined. Like this stuff is so powerful in terms of as an individual to just have an idea and get it out there. It may not be its final expression, but I have so many things sitting in drawers that aren't in drawers anymore. They're on screens.
I'll build on that and saying, yeah, like historically we've sort of valued sort of the T-shaped person, right? You've got some like cross-functional skills and you build a deep well of expertise. AI is awesome in that even if it can't match human proficiency, like it'll make you go from T-shaped to a tripod to a table. You can take things to completion. And so I think we'll tell stories that wouldn't have been told otherwise. We'll create worlds that wouldn't have been like created otherwise. And I literally think you'll be able to turn your mind inside out. Like, and that to me is a future that is absolutely exciting and worth fighting for.
I love that. I love all of that. Yeah, I would just say like this is just the most incredible opportunity to stop begging for permission and just start doing more of what you love. So that's why I wake up in the morning.
I'm going to echo all that and just say one other thing, which I think is true, which is it is going to reward those that have an appetite for education, those that have an appetite and a curiosity for continuing to learn. And as I love learning new things, I think that we're in an environment where you'll be rewarded for learning new things and trying new things. And I feel like if it wasn't that, if we were in a stagnated position right now where nothing changes and we expect to be exactly where we were last year when we come back next year, I need to get a new industry. So the fact that we're in an industry that's kind of saying, God damn it, like, let's just see what we can do here and how am I going to work out this thing? Creative problem solving is why I kind of got into the industry in the first place, and this is like ground zero for that. But with that, I have to thank you guys for being here. So we need a round of applause for you guys for sitting through the last session of the FMX. Big thanks to our panelists. And we'll see you when you're buying at the bar in a year's time. Thanks, guys.
Beers on Ben.